There is a moment in great guitar playing when you stop counting the notes and start remembering the feeling. David Gilmour understood that moment better than almost anyone. While other guitarists built their reputations around speed, complexity, or constant movement, Gilmour often seemed to do the opposite. He would let a note breathe, allow a bend to rise slowly, and leave just enough space before the next phrase arrived. Somehow, those spaces became as memorable as the notes themselves. But why does his playing feel so powerful when it can sound so simple? And what was Gilmour hearing that other guitarists were not? The answer begins with an idea that seems almost too simple. Great guitar playing is not always about how much you play. Sometimes, it is about knowing exactly what deserves to be heard. David Gilmour's approach to the guitar did not appear overnight. Before becoming one of the defining voices of Pink Floyd, he developed as a musician by absorbing a wide range of sounds and techniques. He was drawn to the expressive possibilities of the electric guitar, but his goal was never simply to demonstrate what the instrument could physically do. He was interested in making it communicate. That distinction would eventually become central to his style. Gilmour could play technically demanding passages, but when the music called for a simple phrase, he trusted simplicity. He understood that a guitar solo exists inside a song. It has to interact with the rhythm, the harmony, the vocals, and the atmosphere surrounding it. A great solo does not necessarily announce itself. Sometimes, it quietly changes the emotional temperature of the entire recording. This is one reason his playing can be difficult to imitate. At first, the notes appear manageable. There may be only a handful of them. But reproducing the feeling is another matter entirely. The timing has to be right. The bends have to reach the correct pitch. The vibrato has to move at the right speed. The tone has to support the phrase rather than overwhelm it. And, perhaps most importantly, the guitarist has to know when to stop. But that wasn't the full story. Gilmour's restraint was not an absence of technique. It was a result of control. He could create tension by holding a note longer than expected, then release it with a carefully chosen phrase. In his hands, silence became part of the musical vocabulary. To understand why this mattered so much, it helps to imagine a guitar solo as a conversation. Some players speak quickly, filling every pause with another idea. Gilmour often speaks more slowly. He gives each phrase enough room for the listener to absorb it. Then he answers that phrase with another one. The result feels natural, almost vocal. That quality became especially important within Pink Floyd. The band's music was built around atmosphere, patience, texture, and emotional development. Songs could unfold gradually instead of rushing toward a constant series of musical peaks. Gilmour's guitar fit perfectly into that world because he understood how to make anticipation part of the performance. One of the clearest examples is Time. The song contains a guitar solo that does not need to overwhelm the arrangement. Instead, it arrives at precisely the right moment, carrying the emotional weight that the music has been building toward. The notes are memorable because they feel connected to everything around them. What happened next changed the way millions of listeners thought about guitar solos. Pink Floyd's music reached audiences far beyond traditional rock listeners. People who did not play guitar could still recognize Gilmour's phrasing. They might not know the technical details of bending, vibrato, or phrasing, but they could feel the difference. That is a remarkable achievement. A technically impressive guitar passage can attract musicians because they understand how difficult it is to perform. But Gilmour's best solos often attract everyone. The listener does not need to know why a particular bend works. It simply feels right. Then came Money, another example of how Gilmour could make a guitar part memorable without turning it into a constant display. The song's rhythmic foundation gives the guitar a specific role, and Gilmour responds with phrases that complement that rhythm. He does not fight the groove. He works inside it. This idea of serving the song would become one of the most important parts of his legacy. Gilmour demonstrated that a guitarist can be instantly recognizable without playing the same number of notes in every performance. His identity came from phrasing, tone, timing, and musical judgment. Few people noticed how revolutionary that idea could be because it sounded so natural. There was no obvious trick, no complicated formula. Just a musician who knew that one perfectly shaped note could sometimes say more than 10 ordinary ones. His playing on Shine on You Crazy Diamond reveals another part of the equation. The piece gives Gilmour enormous space to work with. Instead of rushing to fill that space, he allows the guitar to become part of the atmosphere. Sustained notes seem to float through the arrangement, and each phrase feels carefully placed. This is where his relationship with tone becomes essential. For Gilmour, tone was never merely about making a guitar sound impressive. It was about creating the right emotional color. A clean sound could feel open and delicate. A more saturated tone could provide warmth and intensity. Echo and other effects could make a phrase feel larger, turning a single guitar into something that seemed to exist far beyond the physical instrument. The remarkable part is that the effects did not replace the playing. They amplified it. A weak phrase remains weak regardless of how much equipment surrounds it. Gilmour's equipment became effective because the musician using it already understood what he wanted to say. But that wasn't the full story. His greatest tool was arguably not a pedal, amplifier, or guitar. It was his ear. Gilmour listens for the emotional center of a phrase. That may sound abstract, but you can hear it in the way he approaches bends. Instead of treating a bend simply as a technical movement from one pitch to another, he gives the movement its own character. The note rises, pauses, settles, and sometimes continues to shimmer through vibrato. That is why learning a Gilmour solo can be surprisingly demanding. A guitarist can memorize every fret and still sound completely different. The notes may be correct, but the spaces between them can be wrong. The bend may arrive too quickly. The vibrato may be too wide. A note may end before it has finished communicating. In other words, Gilmour's simplicity creates a strange challenge. When there are fewer notes, every note becomes more important. This principle appears again in Comfortably Numb, perhaps one of the clearest examples of Gilmour's ability to turn restraint into emotional power. The song's guitar work is not memorable because it contains an endless stream of technical ideas. It is memorable because the phrases feel inevitable. The first solo creates a sense of space and anticipation. The later solo expands that emotional world, allowing the guitar to become almost a second voice. Gilmour does not simply play over the song. He seems to answer it. What makes the final solo so enduring is its structure. It develops gradually. A phrase appears, then another. The intensity rises without requiring constant speed. Each section feels like a natural continuation of the previous one. That approach became a blueprint for generations of guitarists. Instead of asking, "How many notes can I play?" the more useful question became, "What does this moment need?" And that question reaches far beyond Pink Floyd. Gilmour's influence can be heard in rock, progressive music, blues, and modern guitar playing. Musicians learned from his use of space, but they also learned from his patience. He showed that a guitarist could create enormous emotional impact without turning every solo into a technical competition. There is a deeper cultural reason for this influence. During an era when rock guitar increasingly became associated with virtuosity, Gilmour offered another path. His playing suggested that technical ability could be invisible. You could possess the skill to play difficult material and still choose a simple phrase because that phrase served the music better. What happened next changed the expectations surrounding the role of the rock guitarist. Gilmour became proof that restraint could itself be a form of virtuosity. This does not mean he always played slowly or avoided complexity. That would miss the point entirely. His career contains plenty of sophisticated musical ideas. The difference is that complexity was rarely the destination. It was simply another tool. That distinction matters. Imagine two painters. One fills every part of the canvas with detail. The other leaves sections open, allowing the viewer's eye to rest. Neither approach is automatically better. But when the second painter knows exactly where to place each detail, the empty space becomes meaningful. Gilmour's guitar works in a similar way. His pauses create anticipation. His sustained notes create space. His bends create movement. His vibrato adds personality. His tone creates atmosphere. And his timing connects everything together. Few people noticed what this led to. Gilmour helped make the guitar feel almost human. There is a reason listeners often describe his solos as singing. The guitar does not literally have a voice, of course, but Gilmour phrases it in a way that resembles natural speech. A phrase can rise like a question. Another can fall like an answer. A long note can feel like a breath held for just a moment longer. This quality becomes even more powerful because he does not overcrowd the musical space. The listener has time to anticipate the next note. That anticipation is one of the hidden engines of his music. When a guitarist plays continuously, the audience may know another note is coming immediately. But when there is a pause, the listener becomes involved. You begin waiting. You begin wondering where the phrase will go. Gilmour understands that expectation. His guitar does not need to dominate every second. Sometimes the most important part of a solo is the moment when nothing happens. That lesson has become increasingly relevant in modern music. With recording technology making it easier than ever to layer sounds, musicians have more possibilities available to them. Yet Gilmour's work demonstrates that more possibilities do not necessarily mean better music. Sometimes fewer elements create a stronger emotional connection. This is also why his guitar tone remains so recognizable. Tone alone does not create identity. Thousands of players can use similar guitars, amplifiers, or effects. What separates Gilmour is how he combines sound with phrasing. His tone seems designed around his hands. The equipment gives him a palette, but his fingers determine the final image. That is why simply buying the same guitar or attempting to copy the same equipment does not automatically produce the same result. The real lesson is deeper. Listen carefully. Understand the space around the note. Control the bend. Develop the vibrato. Think about the melody. Then decide whether another note is actually necessary. This philosophy also explains why Gilmour's playing has remained accessible to new generations. A young guitarist can hear a famous solo and immediately recognize the melody. Then, as they learn more, they discover the details underneath it. The simplicity is the doorway. The deeper musicianship is what waits behind it. But there is another reason Gilmour's approach remains important: emotional clarity. Music can become technically impressive while losing its central message. Gilmour often works in the opposite direction. He starts with feeling and allows technique to support it. That may be the secret behind the lasting power of Pink Floyd's guitar sound. The guitar is not there simply to demonstrate what a guitarist can do. It exists to serve the story of the song. In Comfortably Numb, the guitar becomes an emotional voice. In Time, it helps express reflection and urgency. In Shine on You Crazy Diamond, it contributes to an atmosphere that feels almost cinematic. Across these recordings, the role changes, but the philosophy remains consistent. Every phrase has a purpose. And once you understand that, Gilmour's playing begins to sound different. You stop hearing the absence of notes. You start hearing the importance of the notes that remain. That is perhaps the most fascinating part of his legacy. David Gilmour did not redefine guitar playing by showing musicians how to play more. He helped show them how to listen more carefully. His influence is therefore not limited to a particular collection of Pink Floyd recordings. It exists in every guitarist who learns to leave space in a solo, every musician who chooses a melody over unnecessary complexity, and every player who realizes that tone and timing can be as expressive as technique. For listeners, his music offers another lesson. You do not need to understand every technical detail to recognize meaningful playing. A perfectly timed bend can communicate instantly. A sustained note can hold attention. A pause can create anticipation. And a simple melody can stay in the memory for decades. That is why Gilmour's approach remains so powerful. His guitar solos may sometimes use surprisingly few notes, but those notes are rarely accidental. They are shaped by patience, control, tone, melody, and an extraordinary sense of timing. The space around them is not empty. It is part of the composition. In the end, David Gilmour's genius is not simply that he knows how to play a guitar. It is that he understands when the guitar should speak and when it should remain silent. He turned restraint into expression and made simplicity feel enormous. Long after the final note fades, the listener remembers not how many notes were played, but how each one felt. And perhaps that is the real secret behind the Pink Floyd sound. Sometimes, the smallest musical gesture can leave the largest impression.